So I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. This is something we've been waiting for the opportunity to talk about, something that's close to my heart as a fan, something that's close to your heart as a Miami native, and of course, a former executive for this ball club, and that is the Miami Marlins, playing much, much better baseball as of late. A nice run of series wins. Tough competitive series loss to the Milwaukee Brewers, but they're playing good baseball. A lot of breakout performances. Kyle Stowers just named an all-star. Augustin Ramirez in the Rookie of the Year hunt. Talking about Edward Cabrera potentially making a leap. Otto Lopez. A lot of good things happening with the Major League team. I mean, if you're adjusting your expectations a little bit, which as a Marlins fan, I'm kind of used to doing. But I wanted to talk to you just about the big picture here. Obviously, with the Marlins, the trade deadline is always going to be something that whether you're buying or selling, and we've seen both sides actually probably been buyers more than you would think, right? Yeah. Thinking back to the years of trading Luis Castillo and the deadline, the buying really didn't work except for this last playoff run with Kim Ng. And that was, you talk about it, every move kind of working. That was one of them. Last year, much more on the sellers side of things, although you did get a Stowers and a Norby who turned out to be, major league value, helping you on this current good streak. I don't just talk to you about trade deadline or the major league team or even the system, just kind of overall state of the franchise. It seems like we're at a crossroads here with the Marlins, and it's not just asset collection, but at the same time, it's the Marlins. You're always kind of looking at that. So where are the Marlins right now from where you stand?
So we finally arrived to talking about the Marlins, even though we watch them, and that's kind of the vehicle through which I watch a lot of the major leagues. So I'm calibrated to the Marlins one way or another, even though this is a national baseball show, not just a local one. But now that we are here, I think I'm in a pleasantly surprised place in terms of actual flashes of major league value, sustained major league value across multiple players, especially core position players that you could think. Augustin Ramirez, Kyle Stowers, at least on that side of the split. It's good. In your arc, you need those guys to also be developing, and you need major league development success stories as you're in your buildup. They don't just all come at once, so you're better off having them happen during this time where you're kind of down overall from a record standpoint. These are the wins, the developmental wins you hope you're getting and moving the ball forward as you progress into your more competitive window. Because what I think this latest run here represents is kind of a pulse in the right direction, a step in the right direction of a core of young players that can be at least, the bones of something competitive that you can then stack on and build on. And you'd hope that that's with younger, mostly controllable players, especially with like Augustin Ramirez and Yuri Perez. Like those kinds of things can really, you can attach a lot of the supplemental things to those kind of cornerstone players and feel like, all right, we're moving the ball forward in the right direction. The fact that that's turning into major league wins is probably also equally important to the development of these players. I don't think you just all of a sudden are good one year to another. I think that model is less sustainable. So if you're not good from one year to another, that means that there's a progression into being good. And so I think them realizing the lesson in learning how to win a major league ball game, I think that pays dues or pays dividends later on. I think a lot of players that are now a part of winning clubs and in their early years having to go through this break out of this cycle of just winning ball games. I think it's a good lesson for the Marlins to have. Now you still zoom out and look at their playoff prediction or their playoff odds, especially the fact that they're in the NL East, and it's just it's tough to live in that division sustainably without looking at the wild card all the time. But I think their chance of making the playoffs is still 0.3, even with a 9-game, 10-game run. So it just shows you the hole that they were in. So zoomed out, it doesn't feel like that moment of prosperity we're going to cash in on playoff odds. As good as this feels, it doesn't feel like it's right there. It feels like it's still a ways away, and especially because of what you and I talked about. The Braves may be below them in record-wise, but I don't think the Braves can survive living in that place for too much longer. So those aren't the Braves of the future. Those are the Braves of this current season, and what we'll see next year is a completely retooled, stacked top of the division there between those Mets, Phillies, and Braves teams. So tough to tell what they're going to do future-wise, but you want to see steps like this on your way to getting into a more competitive window, if that makes sense.
Of course, like those who are new to the show, Adrian worked with the Marlins, head of international there, stepped away to do all this art that you're seeing here in the studio. So you're an insider and an outsider at the same time with this particular operation.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to, the way it's shaping up, I know you've looked at the Rays kind of from the outside,
yep.
right? Because they were the team in Florida. Sure. They weren't like a division rival or anything, but you watch what they were doing, similar payroll, et cetera. It feels as a fan, obviously we know Bendix and where he comes from. It feels as a fan like it's looking a little razy when you look at a Connor Norby's playing third, a second baseman. Otto Lopez and Xavier Edwards just swap in the middle of the season.
Yep.
Liam Hicks playing first base, who is a catcher, or at least came up, I think he was an infielder in college, then played catcher, still plays catcher for the Marlins, but now playing playing first as well. The versatility on defense, kind of the sum of the parts kind of deal where you're patching together something that on paper doesn't seem to make sense, but then is effective, right? You look at the stats, again, not going to blow you away, and everything probably more recent looks better than the whole season. But even on the whole season, you're talking about an OPS that is solidly middle of the pack, right in there right behind the Orioles, ahead of the Brewers, ahead of some pretty decent teams, well ahead of the Braves and the Padres and the Giants. I mean, these are some legitimate teams here, or at least legitimate lineups. So it feels razy. That's not what you came up in. How do you evaluate the style of this team from the outside?
I think if you look at it through the lens of a Tampa Bay Rays, but that's extended itself out to, the Dodgers do things that the Rays did back then. So like that Tampa Bay Rays model of thinking, I think credit to them, established like back in, it's a process that needs to be established 15 years out in front of the results. And so that's where I don't think that there's a clean comparison of the Marlins to the Rays, even if it's Peter Bendix coming over. Like, credit where credit is due to the Rays. Like those processes and those decision-making efficiencies, all the strengths that they had as an organization to get those results, that to me, there's a process ahead of that takes a while. It's for you to, for the whole organization to align with. And that takes a while. That's why I don't see the transition as clean, even though they're low payroll and that Peter Bendix comes from that place. But what I think the Rays established, and I've respected this since my Red Sox days, seeing them play in the division. They know the baselines of what it takes to win baseball games over 162. So like in that sense, they are truly an analytic team because they know the baselines like, okay, this kind of production has to come out of third. This kind of production has to come out of short. This kind of production has to come out of second or right field, or they need to complement each other in these ways, whether it be via platoon splits or timeshares at each position. So like, this older school way of looking at a roster is looking at a 1 through 9 lineup and be like, okay, that's the team for the rest of the year. If you watch the transaction up and down of a major league roster, you'll realize very quickly that nobody's playing every day, at least not in this day and age anymore. Some guys are. But for the most part, you see the fluidity of that lineup every single day, of that 26-man roster, even of that 40-man roster. And so I think the Rays were early to understanding that it requires total value from the position. So they could stack that in different ways. They could stack some positions more defensively and then cover it with the other side of the platoon, or vice versa. Tampa was early to this platoon heavy game, this lineup, disciplined lineups and disciplined bullpen matchups based on the efficiencies of all these. But it takes a lot of roster management. And that's what I think that they didn't get nearly enough credit for. It's like the way that they churn out the 13 position players, the 13 pitchers, cycle out the back end of the 40-man roster, work out of your option players pool between AAA and the big leagues. Those are the things that feel to me more like Tampa Bay Rays style baseball. And it feels like at least a lot of those tendencies are now being applied to this current team. And so I think the lessons here from this year is you're establishing where you are relative to the league in terms of how you win games. And at the very least, you proved you can string 8-9 games together against some of the better teams in baseball and come out on the better side of that, even though on paper, your roster doesn't look like the other, or on payroll, your roster doesn't look like the other ones. But I think the Rays have just shown really baseball over the last 15, 20 years, like you can piece together a win in a different way than we've become accustomed to thinking about the game, which is best lineup, best free agents, all that works as well. And I also said for 162. That model shifts a little bit to the postseason. And that's why I think you've seen the Rays had a run of postseason success, but that's kind of in the distant past now. The postseason model forces you to adjust. And that's why I think it's so hard to win, because you have to build this team for 162 and then built for postseason series matchup. And those things don't always go together. So we'll see how the Marlins end up tackling this problem. But I think they're still, according to the playoff odds, is still a ways away from proving that that's, that they're there right now. But I think a lot of lessons to be learned from that Tampa Bay model, and it feels like they're being applied in this particular instance.
One thing that's unusual to me about the way this all looks is, like an Augustin Ramirez, Yuri Perez, that's sort of your standard top prospect coming up and performing, a lot of control. They're young. That looks how you're used to seeing it. But when you really look at the guys that have stepped up this year, an Otto Lopez now looks like he could be an everyday shortstop for you with the way he's playing defense. He's on pace to be, I believe, a 4-WAR player. Edward Cabrera, now that he has that curveball working, which is something that, you've watched most of his journey. I think that curveball, at least the way how dominant it is right now, that seems like a new step for him. And we'll break him down in a second. But then, Stowers, the way he's impacting the ball. These are all guys who they're pre-arb, but just with only their arb years, they're going to be 30 plus when that's done. So you're talking about potential building block players that are in their late 20s, which I'm not used to seeing that as much, right? You're used to seeing the young guys kind of come up and you say, like how the Braves had it.
Sure.
Or you're bringing in guys this age as free agents.
Right.
To have guys that controllable, that old, who are also making an impact in a way that's very valuable if it continues. How do you address that pool of players? I'm talking about Stowers, Lopez, Cabrera, all in their late 20s or approaching their late 20s.
I think you just look at them with a shorter term window in terms of like their value to your organization. You don't look at them as like, okay, we're going to have these guys for some long extended period of time, because their service time is now up into this category where you only have a limited control remaining of them anyway. So major league value is major league value, and they represent more near-term major league value than maybe total surplus value if they were younger, if they had some future years of control into consideration. But I think the best rosters are constructed with a bracket of this type of player that impacts, because you need this. You're paying this a good chunk of money if you agree to go into arbitration, and they should be the building blocks of your franchise, and you need those pieces as well, in addition to ideally a 23-year-old, 24-year-old phenom prospect, impacting the majors early, as well as, to me, a more balanced 32-year-old, 34-year-old free agent on the other side of this. So you have a total complement of players on your roster. But it's good to see that you at least have those, because those are at least fixed pieces you could work around. A starting shortstop that you feel good about defensively. Go back to a Rays model of baseball, like a good defensive shortstop is kind of be at the cornerstone of that whole philosophy. So if you have that, okay, that's good. If you have, Edward Cabrera as somebody who can credibly front a rotation on a given day, that's also a valuable asset. We'll see how he gets treated here in this upcoming trade deadline. But if you're looking for core pieces to build around, those are at least supplemental pieces to those ideal, like true high upside impact players in the middle of the field. But you need these guys around those guys as well. So there's something to build off here, and it's good. You want to see these guys having a year where it clicks, like Edward Cabrera. Edward Cabrera's journey from legitimate prospect to now is very long, and it's ping-ponged up and down and roller coastered a little bit at different times. But it's good to see him figuring out a place where he could find sustained major league success, because his promise was always through the roof. I remember in those discussions, he always traveled with Sixto Sanchez. He always traveled with some of the higher name prospect arms in the entire minor leagues. And so it's good to see him realizing that and finding the plate a little more, which I think is allowing his stuff to play. It's the fact that he's just putting it over the plate more. That stuff was always going to play well. It just came down to how often he could live over the strike zone. And he's doing that to a pretty good clip now and getting the success that he's getting.
So we're looking at his baseball savant page.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So fastball velo's always been top of the scale. I mean, he's on 97 average. His changeup, which is extremely fast and moves a lot, actually is not giving him a lot of value, it seems like here, nor is his fastball, both in the bottom fourth, right? 22nd percentile on the fastball, 24th percentile on the changeup. But then you look at the breaking ball, 91st percentile, and just from kind of the outside, it seems like it's that curveball, which I don't remember that being a major weapon for him early in his career. At least I didn't see it as a fan. I don't know what the projection was internally, but he's been pretty dominant with it lately. So what do you see just in terms of his skill set and how it's coming together?
I think it's beautiful to watch it come together because the Edward Cabrera always could spin a breaking ball. He always had a really nice big 12-6 hard bite, sharp and he was a big kid throwing from like this higher slot. So it was always a pitch that early on in the prospect ranks, it always stands out because not that many guys have true feel for a 12-6 curveball with bite like that. And he did have it. And he also had some fastball velocity. So Edward Cabrera has always been a kind of like a scouts player. You show up to watch Edward Cabrera on a given day and you catch him on the right day, he looks like the best pitcher in baseball at certain points. But to me, the driver of that always felt like his ability to land the breaking ball for strikes early on in his prospect career, to me, always boded well. Now it would come down to, can he develop a third pitch well enough to be a starter in the big leagues? And when that changeup came around, it's sick. He throws that changeup 24% of the time versus 23% of the sinker, and he's throwing both fastballs, which is interesting. So he's utilizing both sides of the four seam and the two seam. But that curveball, it's such a weapon because it opens up the rest of your arsenal. And for him in this case, at a 91 breaking value here on Baseball Savant, it's playing like one of the best pitches in all of baseball is that curveball. So it's good to see him realize this kind of ceiling. And you're hoping that this is that opens up a window of sustained major league impact for Edward because he's always had this in the tank. And every pitching coordinator, every scout that's worked on him has always been, there's never been a deficit of talent or upside with kind of limitless ceilings. If you're already 6'5", you already throw this hard, you already have this kind of secondary arsenal. Putting it over the plate is the only thing stopping you from being in the top argument for pitchers in all of baseball. So I think he's got the weapons to back it. We'll see how long he can live over the plate. But this, in a year like where Sandy's having perhaps a down year and Yuri's gone for most of the year and you lose Luzardo, it's good to see that you still have depth beyond into the starting pitcher ranks. And and in a year where Meyer's been down as well, this is their pitching success story for this year, I think.
I mean, you talk about just the curveball, and shout out to Just Baseball for the stats. Opponents are posting a .188, so they're in 188 ex-WOBA against the pitch. Last year, 298, just a curveball. So I mean, the fact that he's turning that potential into production is pretty impressive. One guy I wanted to highlight here. We're going to talk about the All-Star break or the All-Star game in a second. Kyle Stowers, and he's somebody who really struggled with swing and miss last year. Looked like he might not even make it out of spring training. Still really is not doing great in terms of whiff percentage, and those are the areas where he's weak. But man, his impact stats, you look at his baseballs, I'm sure you're pulling up now. I mean, red yeah, down the line when it comes to hitting this baseball hard. So with a guy like that who's in his late 20s, college player, swing and miss is there, but now he's hitting it, and it's making an impact. Defensively, kind of limited. Range is not there. Good arm. He's had some great outfield assists. He's showing off the arm. How do you look at a player like a Kyle Stowers from a projection standpoint, trying to build either around him or, I don't know, do something with him? Like, where do you see Kyle Stowers in this future?
I think he's an important piece of the club for sure. An important, I don't know if it's a core piece or just a piece that needs to be very important, which is a corner outfield slug-driven production, right? And the big jump here that he's taken is really an ability to still get on base despite having like a less than favorable whiff rate and K rate. So it's his ability to get on base unlocks a value point for him. He's getting on base at a 350 clip, right? In addition to the off the bat stuff that you're talking about. So in terms of 3 true outcomes, you're either getting on base via the walk, or you're hitting something hard in the air for power, or you're striking out. And that's, if you're getting on base through that, you can survive. Those are like that's a profile that can find success in the big leagues. And that's, we go back to the swing decision argument. Like, even if you have a miss component to your swing, if you just have the ability to also get on base and limit your chase, and his chase, he's got a higher whiff than his chase. So the chase is actually, he'd probably want it in a better spot, but that's the I don't know. That's the marker that is the most, depending on how well you control that and control the chase, I feel like that your swing decision score shoots up and down. Because if you could just not give in to the pitches that you know aren't damage pitches, now you're only really swinging and chasing a pitch where you feel is in your happy zone until 2 strikes where you just defend it anyway. But when that opens up to you, I feel like that's where players find a pocket of sustained success, especially him versus right-handed pitching. He can live in this territory and make, I don't know, 30, 40, $50 million in this range of production as is. But I don't know that it's a player that you stick in the middle of it and you extend for long term. I need to see more of this sustained success before you determine this is a core piece for you moving forward, especially because you have some diminishing control of the players. He's been in the big leagues before. But it's good to watch a guy go from last year to this year. It's good to know that that's doable in your organization. Like, he did this as a member of the Miami Marlins, where he created this kind of value from his entry into the Miami Marlins to right now to all-star selection. That's a success, developmental success story of the Miami Marlins. Whether it's all accredited to them or not, that doesn't matter. Like, that's what you need to have happen. You need to be able to identify a player, have him come here, increase value or increase his overall, major league impact and skill set, and then feel like you can scale that and you can replicate that process to another player. That's where I think you need to kind of autopsy this decision. What went right in your targeting of Kyle Stowers? And then once he got here, what did you do with him specifically to improve his swing decisions, to improve the plate discipline?
The barrel's gone up. The barrel rate's gone up
tremendously.
Barrel
rates have gone up. So there's some good things happening in this particular scenario that show, okay, a scalable, replicable model. If you can do this over 4 or 5 positions, then it gets closer to what we used to think about the Tampa Bay Rays, or maybe still do, but that you can find value scattered throughout the entire roster and then total that up at the end of 162, and you're sitting on a lot of ball games that you won. So
one guy I want to ask you about, because I know you're always talking about, having those dudes up the middle, right? You need dudes up the middle, and obviously shortstop, kind of the marquee spot. I don't think when you picture that, you picture an Otto Lopez, right? Especially someone who was playing second base to start the year, very good second base, but certainly was not projected to be this kind of shortstop. And then you look at the WAR, which is going to be in excess of 4. And you look at the baseball savant. I mean, ex-WOBA 81, his expected batting average 92 percentile. He runs the bases. 85 in base running value, 82nd in sprint speed. And then on the in terms of fielding, the arm strength's probably not where you wanted at shortstop, 52nd percentile, but his range, outstanding, 95th percentile in range at the plate. He's not striking out. His in zone. You don't see the in zone there, but I'm sure he's not missing too much in the zone based on these stats. He's chasing a little bit, but overall, a nice offensive picture on a guy that's playing defense the way you want it, running the bases, and he's older at, how old is he? 26 years old, but he's not old, and he's got control. Did they stumble into a building block here with Otto Lopez, given the versatile skill set and the position that he plays?
I think a building block. Again, I'd stop short of saying this is a cornerstone player for them, but I think it's a building block player, because the sexiest asset in all of baseball is Bobby Witt, a stud shortstop that does it, crushes it defensively, crushes it offensively, crushes it on the bases. Bobby Witt is like,
sells the jersey.
That's the sexiest thing that you could have playing the shortstop position, and you should always shoot for that. But there are different ways to create value from the shortstop position, and it's the position where defensive deficiencies show up the quickest. It's just the hardest position to play on a Major League Baseball field, in my opinion, and it's the easiest to get exposed at if you're not prepared to play that position, because it gets a lot of action. The ball gets hit hard there. You don't have to have elite arm strength, but you can't have below average arm strength playing shortstop.
Xavier Edwards, we saw that.
You need to have like otherworldly speed and like foot, educated feet and things like that to overcome below average arm strength. So you need arm strength. You need internal clock. You just need to know you're in the middle of every single play, whether you like it, want it or not. And it just has, to me, it has, along with the catcher, the highest defensive demands that are non-negotiable at the position. And so you can either try to always have offense there as well, or you can decide, okay, and at this position, I'm going to have well above average defense. And if the offensive contributions from here are in the 7 or 8 or 9 holes in a lineup, let's say, then I'm okay with that. A lot of teams want to maximize that out because Bobby Witt is possible. Ellie De La Cruz is possible. You should get that if you can get it. But it's the hardest thing in baseball to really grasp, especially young and controllable. So if you don't have that, then it stands to reason you could stuff the position defensively and still be accruing WAR and accruing major league run value, win value, especially in this case that he backs it by the base running stuff as well. If you're on base, you make a lot of contact, your base running ends up showing up a lot, and in not the stolen base ways that you think. Major league teams have base advancement metrics that are beyond just scoring runs and stolen bases that just, he clearly ranks in the 85th percentile of base running value and fielding value. So he is stacking value, and he's not striking out a whole lot. So this is a sneaky player in the major leagues overall. And I think the tempting thing is that other teams can recognize this as well. So if you don't view it as a core piece of your group moving forward, this is just as tradable of an asset to a contending team that needs this kind of profile. And none jump out right away, but this feels like something that survives well as a 11th, 12th, 13th man on a postseason playoff contending roster. So, but as it relates to a Marlin, I think you're seeing them win more games by having elite defense at shortstop. I think there's a direct correlation there. Like if you're at least strong up the middle defensively, that's a good starting point as a defensive team. It's harder to address that after the fact, right? And stuff offense. It's hard to get both out of that position. So I think if you're going to choose one at this particular position as it relates to major league wins, I think Otto Lopez moving a lot of the needle for the Marlins here. Just stability at the most important defensive position.